Hello and welcome to the Minds on the Frontline Podcast, brought to you by the Frontline Strong Together 5 program. FST5 provides streamlined access to behavioral and mental health services, as well as crisis resources for Michigan's Frontline 5 workers and their families. This includes all professional, part-time, and volunteer firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, corrections officers, and 911 dispatchers in Michigan and their immediate family members. First responders and mental health experts collaboratively created FST5 to provide 24/7 live support, effective resources, and cutting-edge services to prevent and alleviate PTSD, anxiety, depression, and other frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. Need help now? If you are a frontline worker in Michigan or an immediate family member experiencing any crisis, work-related, substance abuse, depression, relationships, finances, or any other, reach out by calling 1-833-34-STRONG or go to fst5.org for more information. I'm Jeff Lassers, one of the hosts of the Minds on the Frontline podcast, and I'm a professional firefighter, paramedic, educator, and content creator. Minds on the Frontline is co-hosted by Mike Mattern, who is also a professional firefighter and paramedic. In addition, Mike is a peer support team member for his fire department and the Frontline Strong Together 5 program, a board member of the Michigan Crisis Response Association, and the former chair of the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union Behavioral Health Committee. Mike has training and experience with frontline worker mental and behavioral health. On the other hand, I do not. My role is to produce the show, whereas Mike is our resident subject matter expert. Together, we hope to inform, educate, and entertain frontline workers, their families, and the public regarding the realities of frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. In this episode, we are joined by Conrad Weaver, an award-winning filmmaker and director of PTSD 911, a groundbreaking documentary that explores the mental health struggles faced by first responders across the United States. As an outsider to the first responder community, Conrad identified the urgent need to bring these issues to light and has earned recognition for his work in documentary filmmaking, including The Great American Wheat Harvest, Thirsty Land, and Heroin's Grip. Through PTSD 911, Conrad embarked on a journey across the nation, immersing himself in the lives of first responders to capture their raw and powerful experiences. The film highlights the psychological toll of their work, the stigma surrounding mental health, and the systemic challenges they face. It also emphasizes the courage and resilience of these individuals, while advocating for a culture of support and meaningful change within their agencies. During this episode, we explore Conrad's insights into the making of PTSD 911 and discuss actionable strategies for agencies to support frontline workers, including fostering wellness, peer support, and access to culturally competent resources. Conrad's dedication to addressing these challenges offers valuable lessons for fostering understanding and inspiring systemic change to better support our frontline heroes. As always, we aim to provide a meaningful conversation that informs, educates, and inspires those on the front lines and their families. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline Podcast social media channels. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Good morning, Conrad. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
We're all very good, and we're very happy to have you here today. Before we get started, why don't you let everybody know who you are, what you do, and where you do it?
So my name is Conrad. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a dad. I'm a grandfather, as you probably imagine with the beard. I identify as a filmmaker and a podcaster and a storyteller. I've been producing documentary films since about 2010, when I started working on my first feature-length documentary, and I fell in love with this kind of storytelling. And I particularly go after stories that aren't necessarily being told. And so I dive into those stories head first, immerse myself into the culture of those stories to figure out where the story is and how to present it to the public. And so that's what I've been doing, for the past number of years. I love what I do. I get to do this. My wife has a really good job, and so she supports what I do, and she green lights my projects. So if I have to travel for, I need to have her approval. And not that I need her approval, but I need her approval. You know how that goes. So, but I live this amazing life that I can't believe I get to do and meet people and tell stories and travel and yeah, just an amazing journey that I've been on for the last number of years.
Awesome. Why don't you give us a brief overview of the stuff you did prior to PTSD 911, just so they understand the big contrast we're talking here.
Sure. So I started out my filmmaking career kind of working on corporate stuff, boring corporate videos and marketing stuff. And then I got some fun gigs, like I did behind the scenes documentary at the 2005 presidential inauguration. And a security company hired me to do some behind the scenes stuff. And so, hey, this is a cool way of telling stories, and I can get paid to do it. And so in 2010, 2011, I discovered this story out of the Midwest, and it was about these wheat harvesters who were traveling from Texas to Montana across the country with their combines and their tractors and their RVs, and they would harvest wheat for a farmer. And so I was reading a blog one day, and my wife looked over my shoulder and she said, "You should make a movie about that." So we did. We made the great made the Great American Wheat Harvest. Didn't realize that would really propel me into the filmmaking world, and that film did really well. I got a nice little trophy sitting on the shelf back here, a little Emmy for that one, and so that was fun. And so that one led to doing a story about the drought in the American West called Thirsty Land. Spent a lot of time in California and with farmers and city managers and water managers and all that kind of stuff. And then those films kind of took me away from home for weeks at a time. And so I was looking for something more local. And the opioid crisis hit hard here in Maryland. And especially with a friend of ours who kind of went public with it. And so I reached out to her and said, "Hey, let's make a film about this." And so we did. So we had a film called Heroine's Grip. And as a part of that film, I got to do ride-alongs with law enforcement, with fire and EMS services, because I wanted to experience what they experience when they go to an overdose scene. And ironically, I was with the sheriff's department with the drug interdiction team, and we were doing drug interdiction on the highway, which is fascinating and exciting and scary all at the same time. But then we were also I wanted to be there if there was an overdose. Obviously, I didn't want anybody to overdose, but if they were going to do it, I wanted to be there to document that. And every time I rode with the sheriff's department, it was a big fat goose egg, which they were like, "Man, you're the magic potion. We just need to have you ride with us. There's no overdoses." Yeah. I was like, "Yeah, I wish." But then one day I was with the police department, and a call came in, overdose, fatal overdose, arrived on scene. And not something that I was comfortable with or used to seeing or experiencing. And the officers and the medics on scene were like, "It's just Tuesday, just another day." And so that got me thinking about, okay, how did these scenes affect first responders? It's a traumatic scene, a body laying there, needles everywhere and all the stuff. And of course, that's nothing compared to the horrific crashes and all the other stuff that first responders experience. And so I dove into that in a research way, and I discovered this whole thing with PTSD and first responders. So I went back to the officer I was with that day, and I said, "Hey, is like PTSD a thing with you guys?" And she said, "Oh, if you only knew the half of it." And then she said, "If you want to make a movie about that, I'll do anything I can to help you." And what she didn't realize is she had become one of the main characters in the film. Than the PTSD film. And so for the next 3 years, I spent time hanging out with first responders from coast to coast, and captured this story.
You weren't kidding. Coast to coast. You went Texas, California, East Coast, West Coast, Virginia, North,
Boston.
Michigan. You came up to Michigan. Man, you went everywhere for that.
Yeah.
This isn't like you made some calls and did some Zooms and captured it. No, you physically went to these
We
places.
did the Zoom calls because we started working on this during COVID. And so actually the first trailer that we cut was actually all Zoom interviews.
Oh,
And we were, because that's the only choice we
yeah,
had. You know,
that's all you
I
had to
knew I
do.
wasn't
Yeah.
going to use those in the final cut of
Yeah.
it, but I wanted to, I had to have a sizzle. You create a little sizzle that you can then pitch to funders
Yeah.
and for them to kind of envision what this is going to look like. And obviously, you know, that was a caveat. It was like, okay, yeah, we're not going to use Zoom to make this documentary. You could, but we didn't. But then, you know, literally I would go out to California and spend a week with Maddie and his wife, you know, living with them in their house. You know, I was like, you know, I want to say embedded. That's kind of a bad word, but I was in their house, you know, hanging out with them because I wanted to experience the reality of what
You
they were
weren't just showing
experiencing.
up for lunch from your hotel. You were
No,
there for all of the feelings. And for
I
those
was,
who haven't seen the film, it basically focuses on three different people. And Maddie is the firefighter out in California who, and remind me here, it sounds like he had probably some childhood experiences
he did.
that
Yeah.
eventually exacerbated after a lifetime of on the front lines. And like we've said in other episodes, we're not saying that the job creates this, just the calls. It's the human life you have that is
Yeah.
exacerbated by these other experiences that we are thrust into all of the
Yeah.
time.
You know, a first responder comes on the job carrying all their history, you know, and it's been documented that first responders on the scale, the adverse childhood scale, the average score for a first responder is a 7 out of 10. And so you're carrying all that stuff into the job. And now when you're faced with, you know, all the things that you face, that brings those memories back up from the past. And that's certainly what happened to all three of the main characters in my film. That was a huge part of their journey and their suffering from PTSD.
You could tell when you listen to each of the stories, that was their hook. That's what got them, was something in their previous life before they became a first responder that an event triggered something that came from their childhood.
Yeah.
Or early
But you know,
on.
not only do those events trigger that, but that is what often motivates first responders to become a first responder.
Yes, 100%. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And when you talked about being embedded with them, it was good because you got to see the person. You didn't see the firefighter, the police officer, the dispatcher. You got to see them at home in their family life and seeing how it affected their families and away, like the human side of it. It's not just, you know, Maddie's the firefighter. No, let's talk about Maddie. You know, the human side of all of this that a lot of people I don't think realize is when we all take that uniform off, we're human.
Yeah, it wasn't easy to do. Even, you know, specifically with our local police officer, you know, she was in a really bad spot and often wouldn't return my calls or wouldn't return my text. And so when you're in that dark hole, you know, that was worrisome to me. But it was also like I wanted to be there and capture some of those moments. And that's why there's a small piece of the film where I just took her a GoPro and I said, just set this up. If you're out someday and you just feel like talking to the camera, just set it up and talk, you know, and because I can't be there 24/7. And so I tried to do that. I wanted to do that with all three of them. I didn't get quite a chance to do that with all three of them, but I think that worked out with her because one night she was just set the camera up and just started talking, and it's a powerful.
It was raw, very
Yeah.
emotional, raw, especially out of her and Maddie and all of them,
All of
three
them.
of them.
I mean-
but her, you saw this young person, and she'd been on a while because she got hired so young. So she's
Yeah.
like Mike and I. We got raised in this stuff. We were very young when we got into it. So when she speaks about how she's impacted, and then goes on to talk about how the fact of she's trying to get healthy and get back to the job and the hurdles for that, that's another
Yeah.
layer that doesn't get enough attention. It's almost
It's a
like
whole nother
Mike-
layer of trauma.
Yeah.
Yes. One of the most powerful things I remember her talking about in the film was how all of the brothers and sisters on the job would have her back and do whatever it took to get her help. But she even mentioned it. She goes, I guess that just means on the job, not necessarily off the job.
Off the job. Yeah.
And that's a problem that we're seeing a lot, is the kind of the betrayal from the organizations, where you start having an issue, you start having a problem, and they just kind of like put you out to pasture.
They move on.
You
It's
know?
like
Yeah.
they keep moving
And
on.
I'm glad,
like, well, it
and,
didn't work out.
and I'm not glad that she has to experience that, but I'm glad that she had the ability to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think that was important to bring up and talk about, and it was a real powerful moment where you kind of sat back and went, we can do better.
Yeah.
We can do better with this.
So let's talk more about the dispatcher, because I
Mm-hmm.
think you did an amazing job of capturing what they go through.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy to understand what police, fire, EMS go through, but it's easier. Right? I can turn on a TV and there's lots of things dedicated to
Sure.
the things that we do, and it's easy for my mind's eye to appreciate what they do.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to a lot of people why a dispatcher. What do you mean? So they just answer the calls. How bad can it be?
Yeah.
But remind me her name in the film.
So her name is Nicole.
Nicole.
Yeah.
Nicole was a very good representative of dispatcher community that is able to convey not only you dealing with one thing after another, you don't even get the second chapter. You get the introduction to a horror story, and sometimes not every 911 call is crazy, but when they are, you get the introduction to that, and then you send your friends or colleagues out to that in the form of police, fire, or EMS, and then you get to hear shots fired, and then you're part of the Boston Marathon bombing, and you get overwhelmed by all of these crisis over a phone where you can't comprehend or complete those things for you to balance out. So,
or you can't be there. You hear someone in that crisis and you can't be there. You have to convince them that help is on the way. And in the meantime, there's stuff happening that you can't actually do. And so that weighs heavy on our call takers. Our brains are really creative. We create scenes in our brain if we hear it. And so that's what dispatchers have told me, that, we create the scene, whether it's good or bad, we create that scene, and that's our reality, that's their reality at the moment until they hear otherwise. And so in the film, you'll see there's a couple scenes where we're standing on a street corner and she's kind of looking at the scene. I took her out to that scene where that shots fired event happened in Boston. She had never been there. She had never been on the street where that event happened. And one of their officers got shot in the face, and it was a real, she ended up saving his life because of the work she did as a dispatcher, and got a commissioner's commendation. Yeah. But she had never been on that street corner. She said, I envisioned it totally different. Which tells me this is what your brain does. Your brain creates that scene.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was a really powerful moment for her to be on that scene. And then we were standing there, and I just said, just talk to me, just whatever you're thinking, just talk to me. And then all of a sudden she stopped. She said, wait a minute. She was like, tomorrow's the 6th anniversary of this.
Wow.
Oh, no.
So it was just a really powerful moment for her, to be there and to experience that once again in her mind.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know what? If I watch the documentary again, that's going to be like,
Yeah, I almost want to go back and rewatch
it after knowing that. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because it's not okay. So I wanted to ask you about something else. Since you traveled all over the place, you had a lot of conversations off camera. Obviously,
Yeah.
you got to have
Sure.
hundreds of hours of conversations to get 5 minutes of film. That's just how it works.
Yep.
But you got an opportunity to see how things work in many other places. And probably one thing you notice is that if you've seen one first responder agency, you've seen one first responder agency.
Right.
They're all different.
They're all
unique
different.
in their own way.
Yeah,
We all
absolutely.
So there's something I caught from the explanation of the people that were giving advice about having support systems for their personnel. Number one was fostering a culture of health and wellness. You have to have that. Number two was you have to have peer support structures available for your personnel, whether that's your peer support team for your agency or multiple agencies, whatever it is. And then you have to have access to culturally competent clinicians and resources.
Absolutely.
Those are the big three I took away. And it just so happens, those are like the big three Mike and I have been preaching. So it almost validated me. But is there any others, or is that just the main part you saw?
No, those are the three. Yeah, I agree. Those are the three big things. I mean, if you can create a culture where it's okay to talk about these things. I mean, just a few weeks ago, I was in Kentucky and I was talking to a battalion chief, and he said that he's been reprimanded by his chief for attending wellness events. It's like,
Wow.
what rock does he live
Yeah,
under?
yeah.
And so
I'd
there's
like
a
to know
lot.
more of the details,
Yeah,
but on the
yeah,
surface, that is
wow.
ridiculous.
yeah. It's just like, okay, that's just crazy. And then there's another place I was at where a chief came up to me, a fire chief, and he said, "We've never talked about these things, just ever." It said we've had a handful of debriefs, with critical incidents stuff, but we've never talked about mental health. And he said, after seeing your film, I realized I got some things to work on personally.
Well, good. I'm
know.
glad he took that away from
Yeah,
you.
and now he's actually getting, launching a support group for first responders. He's doing all these things. I connected him with one of my connections in California, and they're working on things together, and so things are really happening there. But that culture is, I had an old timer tell me a few years ago, he said, our wellness was suck it up, here's a beer, and that's how it was back, in the day. In a lot of places, it's still suck it up, here's a beer.
Yeah, well, it was something we say all the time, and we don't prompt people to say it, but the terms "suck it up, buttercup" gets said a lot, and it was even said in your film. There was one that said we were taught to suck it up, buttercup.
Yep.
It's like,
Yep.
man, this thing's everywhere.
Yeah. And so that's part of what my mission is now, to help agencies understand that has to change, and you have to create a culture. It's not in it, and really like Chief Neil Gang talks about it, from Pinole, California. He talks about, he does it from the top down. He said we have to create an environment that everyone in the building is on board with this.
Yeah.
And it starts with the chief, it starts with the leaders. And I'm seeing across the country, as I'm traveling across the country, there's a really lack of leadership that are willing to step up to make these things happen. Now, I have to say, the needle has shifted in the right direction in the 5 years or so that I've been working in this field. I have seen so many more conversations. I've seen more people willing to talk about it. I've seen more people willing to engage in deeper conversations about mental health and wellness than even 5 years ago. But we still have a long way to go, and creating that culture of where everybody is in on it. So it's totally okay. You have to go see a therapist. Perfect. Awesome. That's, go take care of yourself. That's where we need to be, instead of, Joe's got to, he's got to go see a shrink because,
or better than that. Not only do you need one, do you need a recommendation? Because we have a list of 100 that are culturally competent.
Yes.
They're awesome, and we can get you in tomorrow.
Yep.
That's the next. It's not just. It's almost
absolutely.
like you want everybody to get out of this awareness level.
Yeah.
Get to the operations level. So where do we go?
get it done.
Where's the do part?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. And that's why I love what Todd Jerry does in Garland, Texas, where he says, we have a whole, what he calls a buffet of options for people. Where they had one where I was like, I want to do that. He said they have a therapy group that goes out and shoots hogs from helicopters. I'm like, that sounds like my kind of therapy. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I know. I'll sign up for that one.
Does Blue Cross accept that?
I don't know about that one.
That's definitely outside the box of different therapies.
Yeah, that's the most Texas therapy I've ever heard of.
Exactly.
So you highlighted Garland a lot, but none of your main characters were from there. So was it because Garland is ahead of the curve so much or what was it about that? Because you did spotlight them a bit.
Yeah, I spotlighted them because of what their philosophy is, just from that culture standpoint. And the chief will tell you, and Todd will tell you, hey, we have a long way to go. In fact, we had our film premiere in November down there in the Dallas area, and it was just a few months after that one of their lieutenant, I think it was a lieutenant, died by suicide from Garland PD.
Yeah.
So just because you can have all the things in place,
right,
and it
can still happen.
Yeah, it can still happen. But I liked what they were doing because they were talking about things no one else was talking about. They were doing things that no one else that I had talked to was doing, with the exception of maybe Cal Fire, that had some amazing things that they were doing at the academy level. They were teaching yoga, they were teaching breathing techniques, they were teaching wellness and being centered and all the things, even sometimes before they taught you how to throw a ladder, So that was so vital and important, and they had made this a priority, and they have a whole division that's nothing but wellness now. In fact, actually, Chief Wheatley, who's featured in the film, has a little short. He's the one that says, I wasn't on board with it, and if you'd have told me 3 years ago I'd have been doing yoga, I'd have laughed in your face. Well, he's now the head of wellness for the whole state of California for CAL FIRE. So
That's awesome.
And you know, California has done a really good job. You know, we've done interviews with the UFLAC, with the United Firefighters of Los Angeles City out there in California, and they have mental and behavioral health services paid for by their union that are on staff that help them out. And so kudos to all of those groups that are building a very resilient investment in their people. Because that's the other thing we don't realize is like how much, let's talk a brass tacks. Let's take the humanality out of this and let's make it about money. You know how much money you're going to save long term by giving these resources up front? Okay, so let's put it to you this way. You have a fleet of vehicles. Never change the oil and don't change the tires. It's going to be bad.
It's going to be really bad. It's going to be really bad. You're going to have breakdowns every day.
Yeah.
On your most important resource, the people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we need the oil change. We need the tires changed as well. But, you know, a lot of these departments don't want to spend that money.
Yep. So we do these screening events across the country, and last week we were on the Eastern Shore in Maryland, and we were in Salisbury, Maryland, and we had all the right people in the room there. We had the fire chief, we had his command staff, we had the police chief and his command staff, we had the city manager was there, which was just unusual. We had a state senator, we had other elected officials there, and so we started talking about that. We had a screening, then we had a discussion afterwards, and we were talking about the cost associated with not taking care of our people, our first responders. And I told him, I said, you're going to pay for it either way. You're going to pay for it. You're going to spend the money. You're just going to spend a way more money if you don't do something up front. And so it's so important to set up these programs. And how much of your budget really is it? Not that much.
Right.
I mean,
if you're
you
proactive
talk to
about it,
if you're proactive about it, absolutely, it's not that much. You know how many millions you're going to spend on lawsuits?
Yeah.
How many millions you're going to spend on workman's comp issues? You know, how many millions you're going to spend on training and recruiting and replacing, people with 20 years of experience?
And then not to mention all the other stuff that happens that you can't really measure. Like if you just got a bunch of people with bad attitudes because they don't feel well taken care of, and it's not just from the mental health, it's from a lot of things. You don't have a good relationship with them.
Yes.
You're losing out on productivity. You lose out on productivity, there's not as much training. You do that long enough, an entire generation of people coming up that were new guys at one time now have 5 years on the job and have a new perspective of what's acceptable and the amount and quality of training or whatever the thing is you're doing.
And they'll start leaving.
Yeah.
That's why they'll find a different career.
Yeah,
if you feel supported, and this is there was a TED talk I saw recently, I think with Simon Sinek or somebody like that, who was talking about if your people feel supported, no matter what industry you're in, if they feel supported, they will come, they will work longer, they will work harder, they will work for less pay.
Yes.
If they feel supported.
Like we said it last time, I will follow you to hell and carry gas cans if you're going to lead me the right way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So some of the people that listen to this are not first responders, and we like to educate them a little bit, and you're not a first responder. I think you've probably been adopted by enough agencies at this point. You've probably been in enough calls and had sleepless nights being on those calls, so you get it now.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, what can you say to the general public or even the families of those first responders, just in general, from the nuanced perspective that you've picked up along the way?
Yeah, well, I have said for a while now that our first responders take care of our communities. They, you guys, if you're sleeping at the firehouse, here in Emmitsburg where I live, we have a volunteer station. We have a few paid people, but we have people jumping out of bed at 2:30 in the morning to go attend to someone's emergency. That is hero status to me, because man, when it's 2:30 in the morning and it's 25 degrees and it's snowing and all the stuff, I'm not going to jump out of bed and go help someone else, but you guys do. First responders do that every single day in every community across the country, across the world. And so our first responders deserve to be taken care of, because first responders take care of our communities. And if we have unhealthy first responders, more than likely they're going to start making unhealthy decisions, and they're going to have consequences of those unhealthy decisions. And some of those over the past number of years we've seen on the evening news. And so if you don't want to have first responders on the evening news in a negative way, support them. provide resources, provide financial resources, provide all the support they need to be healthy and thrive, because that's going to keep our communities safer. It's going to keep our communities healthier. And I think first responders, their families deserve to have a healthy, long, productive life, just like all the rest of us do. And so, if we see the average age of retirement for law enforcement is 62, which is also the average age of death for law enforcement.
Wow.
There's a correlation, right?
Yeah.
And so let's help first responders be healthy so that when they do retire, they can keep on living and keep on thriving and supporting their community. So I say support our first responders, regardless of what you think of what the media has portrayed many as. Our first responders deserve support.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
That's really
Amen.
great words. And it's so nice to have somebody backing us up like that from outside.
Who had no background really before this.
He was filming farmers and meat harvesters.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I mean. I mean, that's
Pretty
That's
safe out there in the farm fields.
I don't know. I've seen some of those.
Well,
accidents.
yeah, I know. There's been
Yeah.
there's
Things
that.
can go really wrong.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, tell everybody more about the film and how they can access it. And the intent wasn't just to make the film. You want to make it available, make it as almost like training for a lot of agents.
Yeah.
So tell everybody how and why they should be able to get a hold of that.
You can learn all about it at ptsd911movie.com. You can access the trailers, access all the information about it. But I created this film as a tool for first responder agencies. And so we have it available as a toolkit for agencies to purchase. The entry cost for an agency up to 100 people is $350. But you not only get the film, you get a second documentary with it, which is kind of in the law enforcement field. It's called Risk Lock. It's about kind of use of force, things like that. But then you get all these other videos that were interviews and content that we produced that were related to the film. Some of the interviews that we did with some of the people in the film, we created standalone videos with all those interviews. And we continue to add content to that. And so it's an ongoing toolkit. Plus we have a bunch of downloadables from ICISF, from NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We have things from the 911 Training Institute, from National FOP, and some of our partners. So these tools are available for first responder agencies. And really, the film is a great tool to bring to your agency to help your first responders really start that conversation. So if you're having a hard time getting people to talk about these things, bring the film into your agency. They'll begin talking because we've seen it happen. We've seen agencies begin to open up and seeing, and then bring your local officials to see it.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to just recommend get your politicians to watch it.
Absolutely. Yes. That's why we love doing these public events. Like I'll be up in Wisconsin, at Stevens Point, Wisconsin, in October. Be out in Washington State, also in October, out to Las Vegas at the EMS World Expo. But we're doing these public events then encouraging them to bring their local elected officials, because those are the people, I call them the bean counters. They're the ones that can say yes or no to a budget item, a line item. And if they see this film and hear the conversations around that, that will spark their conversation, say, hey, what can we do for our first responders in our community? So if you want change within your community in the first responder world and having your elected officials kind of help initiate that change, bring the film to your community. And I'll come and we'll bring some people with us if we can, and we'll do a powerful event.
I just want to reiterate this. Up to 100 people in your department, right?
Yeah.
$300?
Yeah. $350. Yeah.
That is nothing.
Yeah, right.
How much does a helmet cost? How much does a fire helmet cost?
That's what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
You should have $350 because I'm telling you right now, the $350 that you spend is going to pay you dividends in the end after watching this film.
Yeah.
And once you get it, it's yours forever. You can use it. You have it forever.
You hit the nail on the head. It's probably the best documentary I've seen when it came to PTSD and first responders.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I searched that stuff out to all over the place. Mm-hmm. And you hit the nail on the head. If you guys are listening, take this back to your department. I'm telling you, it'll be worth it.
It's done in such a way that it's very respectful of first responders. You don't sensationalize anything, but you also don't pretty anything up. You let things be what they are.
It was
and you
raw.
just let the things tell its story. what I love about that and what it can now be is an ambassador for that conversation. Because how many times, and Mike, have you seen somebody bring something to the department they're really passionate about? Like, we need to do this and we need to do this. And you're just hearing the why from them. This allows those people who know they need this in their department to just bring that information to them. Just watch this. Don't take it from me. Take it from this film. And it's not propaganda. It's not produced in a way that's like, oh no, we all have to be, hugs and kiss. No. Here's the real raw what's going on. So if you're having any struggle at your department getting peer support, if you aren't getting any struggle and you just want to keep training everybody and boosting the information about this, man, this film is so powerful for that. And I highly recommend you get it in your system. And we're even trying to get creative in how we can get it in front of more of our providers here in Michigan, and then tell everybody else around us you got to watch this.
Yeah, we've had people that have reached out. Actually, one fire captain out of Orange County, and I kind of quote him on the website. He said, "This film is a game changer." Said they actually launched a whole first responder kind of care ministry through their local church with this film. They launched the whole thing with this. We had a big event there. And he said it's been a transformative thing. And that department, Orange County Fire Authority, purchased the film for use for their whole department. I forget, 1,200 some strong, members in their agency. And so they have it available for their agency to use, forever. And so that's what we love doing.
This. And you didn't price it to make money. You priced it to get off the shelf and in people's minds.
Absolutely. Yep.
I can definitely say for someone who came from the outside, you've done the first responder community proud with it.
Right.
Well, thank you.
More importantly, let's just recognize his wife for, telling him to do it.
Yeah.
She's
her, by the way.
She's
awesome.
She's my rock. Yeah, she's my rock. She got a line in the film. She's an executive producer in the film.
Hell yeah.
Just because I can't do this stuff without her and without her support. And
you can tell you really like her. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. We've been together. So this week we're celebrating 33 years. So actually, no.
Congratulations.
No, I'm sorry. 32 years. 32 years.
Oh.
Yeah. 32.
Like who's counting after 30?
I know who's counting, right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Conrad. We're going to try to get as much traffic over to this movie as possible. And
I appreciate it.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the program.
Thank you for listening to the Minds on the Frontline podcast. We have more great content coming out soon. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you, and have a great day.